So far in this podcast series, we've spoken about the art of the turnaround, what makes companies fail, how to bring them round. Mike, as the man behind the manual, I'd love to know what has brought you to this place of turning round companies. When did you realize that you were someone who likes to work from the outside looking in? Because that really is what it's about, isn't it?
I think there were very early days of my nonconformity, and I think probably one that resonates more than any was I went to a very strict British school, boarding school.
Because you were born, you're British.
Yes, I was born in England. Yes, I sing "God Save the Queen" every morning, but it's a little late now. But anyway, I was raised in England, and I only came to America when I was 26.
So you were from a traditional middle class background. Your father was a doctor.
Upper middle class. He was
Upper
a
middle class.
well-known doctor. I mean, that's a sort of professional position.
And as is the way in England with many upper middle class families, is they send their children, their sons, to boarding schools, what we would call a public school.
Yes,
You were sent away to board at what age?
7, 8.
8 years old.
Yes.
Were you homesick?
No. My home was so terrible that I didn't like the school and I didn't like my home. So I wasn't quite sure which one I hated worse. So I had a rather sad time in my life because when I was at home, I was looking forward to going back to school. And then when I got back to school, I was looking forward to going back home until I got there. And then I was looking forward. So it was a real sort of mixture of emotions and very, very difficult. But being British, you don't show your emotions. You just soldier on. And that's what I did.
You just crack on. And British boarding schools were extraordinary places. I think someone said if you can survive a British boarding school, you can survive anything after that.
Yeah, I think it's my way. If you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. So I think it was very much that type of scenario, and it was Lord of the Flies. I mean, you had to learn how to survive, and I think there was a lot of learning there on how to survive extraordinary difficult times.
Tough learning. You either sink or swim at a British
Yes.
boarding school, don't you?
Yes.
The school you went to is a very famous school, Sherborne, in the county of Dorset.
Yes, in Dorset, yeah.
That's right. How did you survive boarding school?
I think being combative, being a contrarian, being different. I probably survived the school because I was a great athlete. And I was a rugby player, which in the status of British private schools, public schools, that gives you status. If you're a rugby player, their rugby teams are really like the high school football teams over here, or they're really. If you're good at that, then you've got a hierarchy all on its own.
But you didn't play by the rules. There's an incident where you were caned by a prefect, which was what happened in those days back in the 50s. What happened? Talk me through it.
Well, the senior boys were allowed to beat the younger boys, and for any sort of perceived infraction or just because they didn't like you. And so one of the prefects really didn't like me and caned me. And there was a thin bamboo cane with a handle on the end. And in a very undignified way, you had to pull your trousers down, and they would cane you. And there was kind of a rule about how hard they caned you. And you kind of accepted that was kind of the way.
You just gritted your teeth.
And but this prefect went above and drew blood. And at that point, after 2 of the 6 strokes, I decided that was enough. And so I was a strong kid, very strong kid. And so I grabbed him and grabbed the cane, and I caned him 6 times, really hard.
That's unheard of.
No one had ever done it before, and that caused great confusion in the school because they didn't know what the remedy was for this, and they didn't want to encourage anybody else to do this. So I was sort of isolated and eventually had to get caned by the headmaster, and no one in living memory can ever remember someone being caned by the headmaster. So I was an outlier, really at quite an early age.
So that was a really formative experience. At the same time,
It was also formative for the prefect, too.
I should imagine it was. At the same time, or long before boarding school, You had a terrible stammer, didn't you? And I think that is critical.
Yeah, I had from about the age, well, you only can remember probably back to 3 and 4.
Yeah.
But I had almost the complete inability to speak. And this wasn't just a minor stammer or difficulty. This was a contorting stammer where you turned into a pretzel and you couldn't get anything out. And people were sorry for you. They didn't know what to do. You were embarrassed. They were embarrassed. It was a very humiliating experience, made a lot worse by my parents teasing me and humiliating me and laughing about it. And so it was a very, very difficult time.
You've clearly overcome the stammer. Can you just briefly explain how you managed to do that? You must have done it when you were a child.
When I was 16,
Yeah.
I was obviously very anxious to find wonderful young women. And to find wonderful young women, you had to use the phone. And the phone for people who stammer is the worst. There's something about the detachment where you can't see the person that it aggravates your stammering. So I decided there had to be a cure. So I developed a system that was just applicable to me. I don't know whether it would work for anybody else, but I have very good memory. And so I wrote down 1,000 words that I use in every type of conversation. And I kind of analyzed them and looked at the ones that caused a trigger to stammer. And I learnt the sort of mechanism. And then I went to an Oxford dictionary and learned 3 or 4 synonyms for every word that I couldn't say. So when that word came up in my brain to speak, I could substitute a different word.
And it worked. Now, what I find hugely interesting about the stammering and the experience at the public school is that in both cases, you went to the school of self-help. You got yourself out of those messes. What did you learn from those two that helps in your business life?
I think confidence, and we've talked about the word confidence before. I think competence breeds confidence. So once you've done something and it works, you developed competence. And then from that competence becomes the confidence to do it again. And it's a gradual building of the confidence that allows you to do things that other people would shy away from.
But how important are those early life experiences to your current life and business philosophy?
I think they're very relevant to the enjoyment of my entire life because I can look back at this rather checkered start and the progression of things getting better and better and better. We used to have a wonderful expression when we go down to the beach in Cornwall and it would be pouring with rain and the skies would be black. And my parents, the only time they showed any optimism in their entire life, they would say, "I think it's getting brighter." And it wasn't. And we spent our time on the beach in the pouring rain. But as a sort of antidote, when we were going to the beach, they would always say it's getting brighter. And I think that's probably one of the phrases that's always kept in mind. In fact, I was thinking as one of the title of another book that I've written, It's Getting Brighter, because when I look at my life, it's got progressively brighter. And it started out in a dark hole and with lots of challenges, but progressively, particularly coming to America, that was another whole horizon that opened up a new future and possibilities and the elimination of constraints.
So you left the UK, you found a job here. Well, you had a job to come to in
Yes.
Seattle. What was it like leaving the UK? You what, in your late 20s?
In early 20s.
Early
So I was-
20s.
Yeah, first time I visited, I was 23, but when I left, I was 25.
So in your mind's eye, you're leaving this grey, grim country that's riven by class.
Hierarchy, artificial, no meritocracy, coming to this new country.
What was that like?
Stunning. Almost too many opportunities. Almost confusion. I've been let out of prison. And I go to the supermarket and there are 40 choices of cereal. Before I had the cereal that was given to me in prison and I didn't have any choice at all.
Prison being Britain.
In Britain, and kind of hierarchical structure is a prison because you have to obey the hierarchy. And so now it's free.
If you hadn't emigrated in your early 20s, well, it's very easy to say what if. But was it important that you immigrated to the USA as opposed to, say,
Yes.
Australia?
Yeah.
Or
I think Australia has some of the elements, but there's still a tall poppy syndrome. They don't like people standing out too much. In America, they love people who stand out. They actually encourage people who stand out. They also are very supportive of people that fail. You don't have a black mark against you if your company goes out of business. You tried. The merit is that you tried. You failed, well, go back and try again.
I remember someone saying to me, "You must have the freedom to fail."
Yes.
It's a great phrase, isn't
Yes.
it? The freedom to fail. Yeah.
And that's what we have in America, and it's still here. And what I try and encourage younger people is this is the country to try. Other countries, you're not even given the opportunity to try. This is the country where you can try. And if you fail, you dust yourself off and you start again. And no one will treat you negatively because you have failed. They'll treat you positively because you tried.
And how important is coming to Seattle in that journey, as opposed to, say, Washington or LA?
It was the right size at the right time. Seattle was going through a depression after Boeing had let go a lot of people. It was formative, and Seattle is a very, very strange city. Here it was devastated when the SST, the supersonic plane that Boeing was building, was canceled. The 747 was just built. Boeing had run out of money. They'd laid off 50,000 people in a town of 400,000. Devastation just ricocheted through the entire city. But what I saw uniquely was a renaissance that then developed a Microsoft, a Starbucks, a Costco, an Amazon. So this is a city of rebirth. And not only did it bounce back, but it bounced back with vengeance. I mean, Microsoft, world leader, Amazon, world leader, Costco, world leader, Starbucks. These all came from Seattle, and they all came from the ashes that the Boeing collapse caused. Boeing also rebuilt itself, and then it's had some issues, and now it's going to rebuild itself again. So there's a great redemptive quality in Seattle. It may be in other cities, but I don't know. I've been here 50 years, almost to the day, and this is my new home, and I've adopted it, and they've adopted me, and so that is a very comforting feeling. Being this is home. I was born in England, but this is home. This is where I intend to stay.
It's interesting because from my point of view, I listen to you and I hear an American. I've spoken to some Americans who listen to you and they hear a Brit.
Yes.
Do you consider yourself American or British? More American than British?
I think slightly bipolar. I think that's probably the way I would look at it. I hope to have the attributes of the British and adopt the attributes of America. And Churchill said it about his parents, that one was American and one was English.
That's true.
And that produced a unique characteristic, not to compare myself to Churchill,
There's the thought.
because I'm a lot thinner, but it certainly is that combination. And so I think that's what I was lucky enough to have that. And I've experienced two entirely different worlds, polar opposite, and I was lucky enough to come to this. And I've always said that really if my sister hadn't been the pioneer and run away from home and crossed America and gone from San Francisco up to Seattle, I never would have found this wonderful gem.
Have you laid those demons to rest, the ones back in the UK, your childhood, the stammering, the perceived crushing of your spirit, which I get a sense of? Have you laid those to rest?
I never really had them. I never perceived them as being a negative. I perceived them as being an opportunity to overcome. And I've never sort of had a woe is me. It's not quite my personality. I'm a perennial optimist. And I think that's the way I was born. So it doesn't matter what you throw at me. I'm a sort of Houdini, put me in the box, chain me up, throw me in the Thames, and I'll find a way out.
you're 75, and I get a sense
Almost 76.
almost 76, and I sense you've got a heck of a lot of life left in you yet. Where do you see yourself and your companies in 10, 15 years' time?
One, with the software company, I want the legacy of what we've done to stay that way. I will not sell it to the multitude of software companies that want to buy it because they will change it.
Now, this is a company called NetInspect.
NetInspect, yes.
Based in Seattle.
Yes, and that's the most successful company I have right now.
That's your baby.
But yes, that's my baby. That's what I invented. And so I want that to be for future generations, but I want it kept in the way that I've built it, which is we have not increased our prices in 25 years. We haven't lost a customer in 25 years. And we have a very small, wonderful crew of 10 people. And all this would be devastated if I sold it to a third party.
And will you keep turning around companies?
Yes, I'm going to try and do 4 a year.
Wow.
Because I love doing it. And then autonomous machining is, I hope to replicate that. What I've built for the first one, I hope to replicate that at least 50 times before I die, to create not a franchise per se, but a model that can duplicate that across the country.
That's a busy few years ahead, Mike.
It certainly will be. And I think the most important sort of feeling that I have is the French phrase, je ne regrette rien. I don't regret anything. I don't regret having had the aberrant childhood. I don't regret the terrifying moments in my school. And so I think that, to me, is the most important aspect, to get towards the end of your life and be able to say with absolute certainty that you didn't regret anything.
Of that, we are in no doubt. Thanks a lot, Mike.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to The Art of the Turnaround. If you love this podcast, please like and subscribe. You can follow the show on Instagram and TikTok at The Art of the Turnaround. You can follow Mike Dunlop on LinkedIn or his website, theartoftheturnaround.com. This podcast was produced by Cadence 3 Studios. Kate Waters was our producer. Alex Dunlop was the story editor. Spencer Matches was the projects editor. April Bricker was our editor-in-chief. Todd Arbuckle designed our show art. Andrew Kindred is our audio engineer. Benjamin Marks composed the music. The Art of the Turnaround is based on the book by Mike Dunlop and hosted by Alex Dunlop.